A billionaire wakes up to a noise in the midnight and can't believe what his maid was doing with his blind twins. Marcus Wellington stood frozen in the doorway of the nursery, his hand still gripping the cold brass handle. The grandfather clock in the hallway had just chimed midnight, its echo fading into the vast emptiness of the mansion. He'd woken to sounds, laughter, splashing water, the kind of pure joy he hadn't heard in this house since. He couldn't finish that thought. The scene before him seemed impossible, dreamlike in the soft glow of the nursery lamp. His 2-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, sat in an inflatable tub that hadn't been there this morning, surrounded by mountains of bubbles that caught the light like tiny prisms. Their maid, Sofia Rodriguez, knelt beside them, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her uniform sleeves rolled up to her elbows, completely soaked. But that wasn't what made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was his children's eyes. Emma and Ethan, his blind twins, the children he'd been told would never see, who'd been living in darkness since birth, were looking directly at Sofia. Not the unfocused gaze he'd grown accustomed to, but truly seeing. Their eyes tracked her movements as she lifted a rubber duck, followed the arc of bubbles she blew into the air, widened with delight when she made silly faces. They were watching her, seeing her. "That's right, mi amor," Sofia cooed in her gentle accent, completely unaware of Marcus's presence. "See the bubbles? So pretty, yes? Just like the stars your mama used to tell you about." Marcus felt his knees weaken.
How did she know about that?
About how his wife Sarah would sit in this very room when she was pregnant, talking to her unborn babies about stars and moonlight and all the beautiful things they would see together. Emma giggled, actually giggled, as a bubble landed on her nose. Ethan clapped his small hands, reaching towards Sofia's face with a kind of purposeful movement that spoke of sight, not the hesitant touching of the blind. "Mr. Wellington?" Sofia's voice cut through a shock. She'd finally noticed him standing there, and her face drained of color. She started to stand, to explain, but Marcus raised a hand. "Their eyes," he managed to whisper. How long?" Sofia's expression shifted from fear to something softer, sadder. 3 weeks, senor. I wanted to tell you, but you—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "But you're never here," her silence finished. Marcus knew it was true. For 2 years, since Sarah died giving birth to these precious children, he'd barely been able to look at them. The grief had built walls around his heart so thick, so impenetrable, that he'd become a ghost in his own home. He provided everything money could buy, the best doctors, therapists, equipment, but he'd given nothing of himself. "The doctors said it was impossible," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion he'd kept locked away for too long. "Bilateral optic nerve hypoplasia. No chance of vision. I saw the scans, the reports." "Sometimes," Sofia said quietly, reaching out to steady Emma as she tried to stand in the tub, "God has different plans than doctors. Or maybe—" She paused, meeting his eyes with a directness that should have seemed inappropriate from an employee, but somehow wasn't. Maybe they just needed a reason to see. Something worth opening their eyes for. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His children had been healing, had experienced a miracle, and he'd missed it all. Locked in his study, buried in work, drowning in grief and guilt, and the overwhelming responsibility of being a single father to children he didn't know how to love without remembering their mother. Emma looked past Sofia then, her bright blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, finding her father in the doorway. For a moment, Marcus saw recognition flash across her tiny face, followed quickly by uncertainty. She knew who he was in theory, from the brief, awkward moments when he'd checked on them with Mrs. Henderson, the daytime nurse. But this man in the doorway might as well have been a stranger. "Papa," Sofia said softly, encouragingly to Emma. "That's your papa." The word felt foreign, unearned. Marcus hadn't been anyone's papa. He'd been a ghost, a shadow, a checkbook. He'd let his grief over losing Sarah consume him so completely that he'd never even tried to know the children she'd died to give him. Ethan turned to look at him too, and Marcus saw his own eyes reflected back at him, gray-green, searching. Both children studied him with a kind of frank curiosity unique to toddlers, trying to reconcile this tall, severe man with the word Papa. I should. Marcus started, then stopped. He should what? Leave again? Go back to his study, his sanctuary of avoidance? For the first time in 2 years, something cracked in the armor around his heart. His children could see. They had opened their eyes to the world, and he'd missed it because he'd closed his own, not to light, but to love, to hope, to the possibility that life could continue after devastating loss. Would you like to help me finish their bath, Mr. Wellington? Sophia asked gently, as if sensing that he stood at a crossroads, that this moment mattered more than any business deal or social obligation ever could. Marcus looked at the woman who, in just 6 weeks of employment, had somehow given his children what he couldn't: attention, affection, the patient presence that had apparently performed a miracle. She was looking at him without judgment, despite having every right to condemn him for his absence. There was understanding in her dark eyes, and something else: sorrow that recognized his own. He'd read her file when Mrs. Henderson recommended hiring her. 27 years old. Widowed 4 months ago. Her son had died at birth just a year before that. She understood loss in a way few people could. Maybe that's why she could love his children when he'd forgotten how. Yes, Marcus heard himself say, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I would like that very much. As he took his first uncertain step toward his children, toward Sophia, toward the possibility of healing, Marcus didn't know if he was ready. But he knew, watching his daughter's tentative smile and his son's curious gaze, that his children had found their way out of darkness. Perhaps it was time he found his way out too. Sophia had learned long ago that grief had many faces. There was the loud, dramatic grief she'd seen at funerals, the wailing, the fainting, the public displays of devastation. Then there was the quiet grief, the kind that hollowed you out from the inside until you were just going through motions, speaking lines, existing without really living. Marcus Wellington wore the quiet kind. She watched now as he knelt awkwardly beside the inflatable tub, his expensive suit pants soaking up water from the floor, his hands hovering uncertainly over his children as if he'd forgotten how to touch them. Or maybe, she thought with a pang of sympathy, as if he was afraid that touching them would make everything real: the loss of their mother, the weight of being solely responsible for these tiny lives, the overwhelming love and terror that came with parenthood. It's okay, Sophia said softly. They won't break. Here. She guided his hand to Emma's back, showing him how to support her as the little girl reached for a toy boat. Marcus's hand trembled slightly, and Sophia saw his jaw clench with the effort of maintaining control. She recognized that tension. She'd worn it herself for months after Miguel's death, after cradling her stillborn son, after lowering her husband into the ground just weeks before their first anniversary. She's so small, Marcus whispered, wonder and fear mixing in his voice. She's strong, Sophia corrected gently. Both of them are. Stronger than you know. Emma turned to look at her father, water droplets clinging to her long lashes. For a moment, Sophia saw panic flash across Marcus's face, the same panic she'd seen countless times in the past 6 weeks whenever he had to interact with his children. The instinct to flee, to retreat back into the safety of emotional distance. But this time, something was different. Emma reached up with one wet, chubby hand and patted her father's cheek, leaving bubbles on his perfectly groomed beard. The gesture was so innocent, so trusting, that Sophia saw Marcus's carefully constructed walls crack just a little more. Hi, baby, Marcus breathed, and his eyes, those same gray-green eyes as his son's, filled with tears he clearly hadn't allowed himself to shed in far too long.
Hi, Emma. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry I haven't been here. Sophia felt her own eyes burning. She understood his grief more than he could know. 4 months after losing her son, after losing Miguel to that terrible construction accident, she'd been unable to function. She'd stayed in bed for days, ignored phone calls, pushed away her mother and sisters who'd tried to help. The depression had been so thick, so suffocating, that she genuinely believed she might drown in it. What had saved her wasn't time, though people had promised time would heal. It wasn't therapy, though her priest had recommended it. It was purpose. It was Mrs. Henderson, her late husband's aunt, mentioning that her employer needed help with his young twins. It was the moment Sophia had walked into this nursery 6 weeks ago and seen Emma and Ethan, 2 years old, beautiful, lost in their darkness, cared for by competent but detached nurses who changed shifts like clockwork. Children who needed someone to love them. "Mr. Wellington," Sophia said now, watching Ethan try to stand in the tub, his little legs still wobbly. "May I tell you something?" He nodded, not taking his eyes off Emma, who was now trying to drink bathwater despite Sophia's gentle redirection. "When Mrs. Henderson first told me about this job, I almost said no," Sophia continued, reaching over to steady Ethan. "I thought, how can I take care of someone else's children when I couldn't even when mine didn't?" She took a breath, pushing past the familiar ache. "But then she told me they were blind. That they needed someone patient, someone who understood what it meant to live in darkness. And I thought, maybe I can help them. Maybe I can be for them what no one could be for me. A light in the dark." Marcus finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Sophia saw understanding dawn in his eyes. They were more alike than different, she and this billionaire, who lived in a mansion with more rooms than she could count. Both of them had lost everything. Both of them had been drowning in grief. The difference was that Sophia had found a reason to swim. "For 3 weeks," she continued, "I would come in at midnight. Mrs. Henderson told me you work late, that you never check on them after dinner. So I would sneak in and just be with them.
Talk to them.
Play with them. I'd hold them and tell them about the stars, like the photo albums in the library show their mother used to do." Marcus flinched at the mention of his wife, but Sophia pressed on. "One night, about 3 weeks ago, I was reading them a story. One with lots of colors in the pictures, bright reds and yellows and blues. And Emma?" Sophia smiled at the memory, even as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Emma reached out and touched the page. Not randomly, but right where I was pointing. And when I looked at her, really looked, I saw her eyes focusing. Tracking.
Seeing.
Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus asked, and there was no anger in his voice, only profound sadness. "Why didn't you call me, bring me here?" "I tried," Sophia admitted. "That first night, I ran to find you. But your office door was locked, and through it I could hear." She paused delicately. "I could hear you crying. And I thought, this man is breaking. If I interrupt now, if I force him to face this miracle when he's barely holding himself together, I might break him completely." Marcus's face crumpled, and Sophia saw 2 years of suppressed emotion threatening to break through. She'd been right to wait, she realized. If she'd forced this confrontation earlier, before he was ready, he might have retreated so far into himself that he'd never come back. "So I waited," she continued. "I came every night. I watched them discover the world, colors, shapes, my face. I watched them learn to recognize me, to smile when I walked in, to reach for me. And I knew I was doing something wrong, that you should be the one they smiled for, but I thought." Her voice broke. "I thought at least someone should be here to witness them opening their eyes. Someone should be here to see the miracle." Ethan chose that moment to lunge toward Marcus, his little arms outstretched. Marcus caught him instinctively, pulling his wet son against his chest despite his expensive suit. The little boy looked up at his father with those wide, seeing eyes and said, in a voice that was pure joy, "Papa." It was probably the first time Ethan had said the word with real recognition, real understanding of who his father was. Marcus made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and held his son tighter. "I've been a coward," Marcus whispered against Ethan's wet hair. "I've been a terrible father. I let my grief over losing Sarah make me lose them too." "You didn't lose them," Sophia said firmly. "They're right here. And yes, you've missed time. Precious time you can never get back. But, Mr. Wellington, you're here now. That's what matters. You're here now." She reached into the tub and lifted Emma out, wrapping her in a soft towel.
"Here.
Hold your daughter. Really hold her." Marcus shifted Ethan to one arm and took Emma with the other, and the sight of this powerful, intimidating man holding his two babies with such tender uncertainty made Sophia's heart ache. This was what she'd been working toward for 3 weeks, not just healing the children, but healing the father who'd lost his way. "What do I do?" Marcus asked, and the vulnerability in his voice reminded Sophia that grief could reduce anyone to helplessness, regardless of wealth or power. "How do I fix this? How do I be their father after 2 years of being nothing?" "You start by being here," Sophia said simply. "You show up. You read them stories. You give them baths. You let them see you, really see you. Not just with their eyes, but with their hearts." She paused, then added softly, "And you forgive yourself. Because your children need a father, not a ghost haunted by guilt." Marcus looked at her then, and Sophia saw the question forming before he asked it. "How did you do it? How did you survive losing your son, your husband, and still find the strength to be here for my children?" Sophia smiled sadly. "I survived because I had to. Because staying in bed, staying in the darkness, meant letting grief win. And I couldn't." Her voice caught. "I couldn't let my baby's short life mean nothing. I couldn't let Miguel's death be the end of my story. So I chose to find purpose in the pain. I chose to let my broken heart teach me how to mend other broken things." She gestured to the twins, now both snuggled against their father's chest, their eyes drooping with sleepiness. "Your children gave me a reason to wake up.
To keep going.
They needed someone to love them, and I needed someone to love. We saved each other, Mr. Wellington."
They just don't know it yet.
Marcus nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. Two survivors of devastating loss, finding their way back to life through the innocent dependence of children who needed them. "Thank you," he said finally, "for seeing what I couldn't, for being what I wasn't, for staying when I'm sure you had every reason to leave." "I stayed," Sophia said quietly, "because someone once told me that the only way through grief is through. Not around, not over, but straight through the middle of it. And these babies." She touched Emma's cheek gently. "They're worth walking through fire for." As Sophia helped Marcus carry the twins to their cribs, she felt something shift in the mansion's atmosphere. For 2 years, this house had been a mausoleum, beautiful but lifeless, a monument to loss. Now, finally, it felt like someone had opened a window, letting in fresh air and possibility. The healing had begun.
For all of them.
Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus Wellington's life transformed in ways he'd never imagined possible. He started working from home 3 days a week, something his board of directors had been encouraging for months, but he'd stubbornly refused. He found himself leaving meetings early, declining dinner invitations, canceling business trips. For the first time in 2 years, his children were his priority. And it was Sophia who taught him how to be their father. She was patient in a way that humbled him, never judging when he forgot to warm Emma's bottle or put Ethan's shirt on backward. She showed him how they liked their eggs cut into small squares, how Emma needed her stuffed rabbit to fall asleep, how Ethan was afraid of the vacuum cleaner but loved the sound of rain. "See," Sophia said one afternoon, guiding Marcus's hand to touch Emma's back in a gentle circular motion. "This helps her calm down when she's overstimulated. Your wife used to do this. There's a video on her phone, the one in the drawer in your bedroom. I found it when Mrs. Henderson asked me to organize some things." Marcus stiffened. "You went through Sarah's things?" "Mrs. Henderson did," Sophia corrected gently. "I just helped. And Mr. Wellington, those videos, your children should know their mother. You should watch them, remember her. Grief isn't something you bury and forget. It's something you carry and honor." That night, for the first time since Sarah's death, Marcus opened the drawer in his nightstand and pulled out his wife's phone. The battery was dead, but he charged it, his hands shaking as he waited for it to power on. There were dozens of videos. Sarah talking to her pregnant belly. Sarah in the hospital, hours before the emergency C-section that would save the twins, but take her life. Sarah's voice, forever young at 32, telling her unborn children about the world they'd enter. "Hi, babies," Sarah's voice said from the small screen, and Marcus had to press his fist against his mouth to keep from sobbing. "It's Mama. I know you can't see me yet, but you will soon. And I want you to know that you're so loved. Your daddy, he's going to be the best papa. He's scared right now, scared of how much he loves you already, but that's okay. Love is supposed to be scary. It means you have something worth protecting." Marcus paused the video, Sarah's smiling face frozen on the screen. She'd known. Even then, she'd known he would struggle with fatherhood, with the weight of loving something so completely that the thought of losing it was unbearable. And when he had lost her, he'd done exactly what he'd feared. He'd run from the love instead of toward it. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the frozen image. "I'm so sorry I wasted 2 years. But I'm trying now, Sarah. I'm trying." The next morning, Marcus came downstairs before dawn to find Sophia already in the kitchen, preparing bottles. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, and Marcus realized he'd never asked about her schedule, her life outside these walls. "Do you ever sleep?" he asked, meaning it as a joke. But Sophia's smile was sad. "Not as much as I should. But sleep brings dreams, and dreams bring." She trailed off, then shook herself. "The twins will be awake soon. Emma's been waking up earlier lately. I think her eyesight is still adjusting to having light." "Sophia," Marcus said, and something in his tone made her turn to face him fully. "Sit down. Please." She hesitated, then sat at the kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug that said, "World's Best Mom," a cruel irony Marcus wished he'd noticed before. "I've been thinking," Marcus continued, taking the seat across from her, "about what you said, about how the twins gave you a reason to keep going. But Sophia, who takes care of you?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. I'm fine, Mr. Wellington." "You're not," he said, not unkindly. "You're running yourself into the ground. You work your regular shift, then you sneak back every night. You're living in the staff quarters, in a room barely bigger than a closet. You're giving everything to my children while I what?" Sophia's eyes flashed with unexpected fire. "While I grieve. While I try to find meaning in loss. Yes, I'm tired. Yes, I wake up every morning wishing things were different. But helping your children isn't a burden, Mr. Wellington. It's the only thing keeping me alive." The stark honesty of her words silenced him. They sat in the pre-dawn darkness, two broken people who'd found temporary purpose in the innocent needs of two toddlers. "I want you to move into the guest suite," Marcus said finally. "The one on the second floor, near the nursery. It has its own bathroom, a sitting room, space for your things. And I want to pay you more, double what you're making now." "Mr. Wellington, I can't." "You can," he interrupted.
And you will.
"Sophia, you gave me my children back. You gave me a reason to stop hiding. The least I can do is make sure you're taken care of too." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and Marcus realized this might be the first time since her husband's death that anyone had thought to care for her, to consider her needs instead of expecting her to be endlessly strong. "There's something else," Marcus continued, his voice soft. "I want you to tell me about him. Your son. Your husband. I want to know who you lost, Sophia. Because you know all about Sarah. You've watched her videos, read her journals to the twins. It's only fair that I know about the people who made you who you are." For a long moment, Sophia just stared at him. Then, slowly, she began to speak. "Miguel was a construction worker," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was strong, funny, always singing. We met at my cousin's wedding. He was the DJ's assistant, and I was a bridesmaid. He asked me to dance, and I said yes, and 3 months later we were married." She smiled at the memory, even through her tears. "Everyone said we were too young, too impulsive, but we didn't care. We were in love, and we thought that was enough." "It is enough," Marcus said quietly. "No," Sophia shook her head. "Love isn't always enough. We learned that when I got pregnant. Miguel was so happy. He'd already picked out names, bought a crib, painted the nursery yellow because we wanted to be surprised. But there were complications. The doctors said the baby wasn't growing right, that something was wrong with his heart." Her hands tightened around the mug. "They said I should terminate, that carrying to term would be dangerous.
But Miguel and we couldn't.
Even if our baby only lived for a few minutes, we wanted to meet him. We wanted him to know he was loved. What was his name? Marcus asked. Diego, Sophia whispered. After Miguel's father. He was born on October 14th at 3:47 in the morning. He was perfect, tiny but perfect. And he lived for 6 minutes. 6 minutes of holding him, of telling him we loved him, of taking photos we knew we'd treasure forever. Then his little heart just stopped. Marcus reached across the counter and took her hand, and she didn't pull away. Miguel never recovered, Sophia continued. He blamed himself, thought maybe if we'd found different doctors, if we'd tried harder. He went back to work after a week because he said staying home made it worse. Then 3 months later, there was an accident on the site. Scaffolding collapsed. 4 men died, including my husband. I'm so sorry, Marcus said, and the words felt inadequate but necessary. I couldn't even grieve properly, Sophia said. My family, they meant well, but they kept saying things like, you're young, you'll meet someone else, and at least you didn't know the baby long. As if time measured love. As if 6 minutes with my son wasn't worth the lifetime of missing him. It was worth it, Marcus said firmly. Every second of loving him was worth it. Sophia looked up at him, and Marcus saw recognition in her eyes, the understanding that only fellow sufferers of profound loss could share. That's why you don't sleep, Marcus realized. You're afraid of dreaming about them. I dream I'm holding Diego, Sophia admitted. And in the dream, he doesn't die. He grows up. He calls me Mama. And then I wake up, and I have to remember all over again that he's gone. That Miguel's gone. That I'm alone. You're not alone, Marcus said. Not anymore. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. But they were true. In the past 2 weeks, something had shifted between them. They'd moved beyond employer and employee, beyond grieving strangers, into something more complicated and profound. They were 2 people learning to live again, teaching each other that survival didn't mean forgetting, but rather finding the strength to honor their losses while still embracing whatever came next. Thank you, Sophia said softly. For asking. For listening. For caring. Thank you, Marcus countered, for showing me how. A sound from the baby monitor interrupted them. Emma's morning babbling, which would soon turn into crying if someone didn't respond. Marcus and Sophia both stood, moving automatically toward the stairs, toward the children who needed them. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Marcus didn't feel like he was walking toward obligation. He felt like he was walking toward family. The broken learning from the broken how to be whole again, one small step at a time. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, Marcus Wellington found himself doing something he'd never imagined, sitting on the floor of his living room in sweatpants and a t-shirt, building a tower of blocks with his son while his daughter painted what could generously be called abstract art on a large canvas Sophia had set up. Papa, look, Emma called out, her eyes bright with excitement as she smeared purple paint across the canvas in sweeping arcs. Pretty, beautiful, sweetheart, Marcus said, and meant it. Not because the painting showed any particular talent, but because his daughter could see the colors she was mixing, could track her brush across the canvas, could share her creation with him. Every day brought small miracles he'd once thought impossible. Mr. Wellington, Sophia said from the doorway, then corrected herself with a small smile. Marcus, there's someone here to see you. She stepped aside, and Mrs. Henderson entered, followed by an older woman Marcus recognized from photos, Sophia's mother, Rosa Rodriguez. I hope we're not intruding, Mrs. Henderson said. But Rosa wanted to see where Sophia was living, meet the children she talks about constantly. Of course, Marcus stood, wiping paint off his hands. Please come in. Emma, Ethan, come say hello. The twins looked up, and Marcus saw Ethan's face light up when he spotted Mrs. Henderson. The older woman had been their primary caregiver before Sophia arrived, and though she'd been competent and kind, she'd kept professional distance. Now, seeing the children running freely, playing, their eyes tracking movement and color, she pressed a hand to her chest. Oh my stars, she breathed. They're really seeing. Sophia told me, but I had to see it myself. It's a miracle. It is, Marcus agreed, watching as Emma approached Rosa cautiously. His daughter was shy with strangers, one more personality trait he'd learned in recent weeks. Hola pequeña, Rosa said softly, kneeling down to Emma's level. I'm Sophia's mama. She talks about you all the time. Emma looked back at Sophia for reassurance, and Sophia nodded encouragingly. It's okay, mi amor. She's safe. The trust Emma placed in Sophia's judgment moved Marcus deeply. His children had learned discernment from her, had learned that the world could be navigated safely if you held the hand of someone who loved you. Sophia, Rosa said, straightening up and looking around the room with sharp, assessing eyes. May I speak with you? Privately? Something in her tone made Marcus uneasy, but Sophia just nodded and led her mother toward the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson, sensing the tension, engaged the twins in a game of peekaboo, giving Marcus an excuse to follow the Rodriguez women at a discreet distance. Cannot continue like this, he heard Rosa saying, her voice low but intense. Mija, you're living in another woman's life, raising another woman's children. This isn't healing, it's hiding. Mama, please. Sophia's voice was strained.
This is my job.
These children need me. You need you, Rosa insisted. You need to grieve properly, to deal with your loss, not pour all your pain into someone else's babies. What happens when they don't need you anymore, Sophia? What happens when Mr. Wellington gets remarried and you're replaced? Where will you go then? Marcus froze in the hallway, his hand pressed against the wall. He hadn't considered that possibility, hadn't thought beyond the immediate need for Sophia's presence in their lives. But Rosa's words painted a stark picture. Sophia would heal, the twins would grow up, and eventually, this arrangement would end. The thought left him feeling hollow. I'm not thinking about that, Sophia said. I'm just trying to get through each day. By living someone else's life. Rosa's voice broke. Mi hija, I know you're hurting. I know losing Diego and Miguel nearly destroyed you. But this, working yourself to exhaustion, pouring all your love into children you'll eventually have to leave, this is just another kind of death. Maybe, Sophia admitted, and Marcus heard tears in her voice. But Mama, when I hold Emma and Ethan, when I see them smile, when they reach for me, it doesn't erase my pain, but it makes it bearable. They make me remember that love isn't just about loss. It's about connection, about showing up, about being there even when it hurts. And what about Mr. Wellington? Rosa asked, and Marcus's heart stuttered. He's a widower, you're a widow. You're living in his house, raising his children, spending every waking hour with him. People will talk, Mija. They already are. Let them talk, Sophia said fiercely. There's nothing inappropriate happening. We're helping each other survive. Is that all it is? Rosa asked gently. Because I've seen how you talk about him. How your voice softens when you say his name. And I'm worried, Sophia. I'm worried you're replacing one loss with another doomed situation. Marcus couldn't listen anymore. He moved away from the kitchen, his chest tight with emotions he wasn't ready to examine. Rosa was right to worry. This situation was temporary, unsustainable. Eventually, Sophia would need to move on with her life, and he would need to learn to parent his children without her constant guidance. But the thought of losing her felt like losing Sarah all over again. Papa sad? Marcus looked down to find Ethan standing beside him, those perceptive gray-green eyes studying his face with concern. His son, his seeing, growing, miraculous son, had picked up on his emotional shift. Just thinking, buddy, Marcus said, lifting Ethan into his arms. Just thinking about grown-up stuff. Don't be sad, Ethan said with the simple wisdom of a 2-year-old. Sophie make it better. Sophie make everything better. The words struck Marcus like an arrow. His son was right. Sophia had made everything better. The house felt like a home now, his children were thriving, and Marcus himself was learning to be human again instead of just going through motions. But what happened when Sophia realized she deserved more than being a stand-in mother for another woman's children? That evening, after the twins were asleep, Marcus found Sophia in the living room, curled up on the sofa with a photo album in her lap. He recognized it as one of the albums from Sarah's Things, pictures from their college days, their wedding, the pregnancy. "May I sit?" he asked. Sophia nodded, and Marcus settled beside her, careful to maintain appropriate distance, even as everything in him wanted to offer comfort. "I'm sorry," Sophia said without looking up. "About my mother. She means well, but—" "She's right," Marcus interrupted gently. "About some things, at least. This situation, it can't last forever. You have a life to live, Sophia. Dreams to chase. And my children and I, we can't keep you tethered here out of our own neediness." Sophia finally looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was so raw it took his breath away. "What if I don't have dreams anymore? What if taking care of your children is the only thing that makes me feel alive?" "Then we need to fix that," Marcus said. "Both of us. Because Rosa was right about something else too. We're not healing. We're just existing. Using each other's presence to avoid dealing with our grief." "Is that so wrong?" Sophia asked. "When the alternative is drowning?" "No," Marcus admitted. "It's not wrong. It's survival. But Sarah wouldn't want me to just survive. She'd want me to live. And your Miguel, your Diego, they wouldn't want you to just get through days. They'd want you to have joy again." Sophia closed the photo album, her fingers tracing Sarah's smile on the cover. "Your wife was beautiful. And from everything I've learned about her, from the videos, the journals, the way people talk about her, she was kind, generous, the kind of person who made everyone around her better." "She was," Marcus said. "She was all those things." "Then maybe," Sophia said slowly, "maybe the best way to honor her is to keep doing what she would have done. Love your children. Be present. Choose joy even when it's hard." She paused. "And maybe the best way to honor Miguel and Diego is to keep living. To keep opening my heart even when it's scary." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them contemplating the impossible task of moving forward while carrying the weight of profound loss. "I don't want you to leave," Marcus said finally, and the admission felt dangerous, but necessary. "I know that's selfish. I know you deserve more than being a nanny in someone else's house. But the thought of you going, it terrifies me." Sophia turned to face him fully, and in the soft lamplight, Marcus saw not just the young widow who'd saved his family, but a woman of remarkable strength and grace. "I don't want to leave either," she whispered. "And that terrifies me too. Because what if we're just clinging to each other, because we're both drowning? What if this isn't real? It's just shared grief." "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I don't know what this is, or what it could be. All I know is that since you came into our lives, I've remembered what it feels like to hope. And that has to count for something." "It does," Sophia said. "It counts for everything." She reached out then, taking his hand in hers, and Marcus felt the touch reverberate through his entire body. It wasn't romantic, exactly, or maybe it was the beginning of something that could become romantic given time. But more than anything, it was human. Connection. Two people who'd been isolated in their grief finding comfort in shared understanding. "So, what do we do?" Sophia asked. "We take it one day at a time," Marcus said. "We keep showing up for the twins. We let ourselves grieve when we need to. And we forgive ourselves for not having all the answers." He squeezed her hand gently. "And maybe, if we're very lucky, we figure out how to be whole people again instead of broken pieces." "I'd like that," Sophia said, and her smile, though tinged with sadness, was genuine. "I'd really like that." As they sat together in the quiet house, hands clasped, grief acknowledged but not controlling them, Marcus realized that healing wasn't a destination. It was a journey taken one small, brave step at a time. And he was grateful beyond words that he didn't have to take those steps alone. The change came on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 months after Marcus first found Sophia bathing his children at midnight. Dr. Patricia Chin, the pediatric ophthalmologist who diagnosed the twins with bilateral optic nerve hypoplasia at birth, sat in Marcus's study with a file folder full of test results and an expression that suggested she was struggling to reconcile scientific fact with evidence. "I don't have an explanation," Dr. Chin said, spreading the papers across the desk. The original scans clearly showed severe optic nerve underdevelopment. Without adequate nerve tissue, vision should be impossible. And yet they can see, Marcus finished, glancing at Sophia, who stood by the window with her arms wrapped around herself. Not just see, Dr. Chin corrected. Mr. Wellington, your children have near-perfect vision. 20/25 in both eyes for both twins. Their tracking is excellent, their color perception is normal, their depth perception is age-appropriate. By every measure we have, Emma and Ethan are visually typical children. How is that possible? Sophia asked. The medical literature, everything we read, it said the condition was permanent. Dr. Chin removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. I've been practicing pediatric ophthalmology for 23 years. I've seen thousands of cases of optic nerve hypoplasia, and I've never, not once, seen spontaneous regeneration of this magnitude.
She paused.
I'd like to write a case study, with your permission, because either our understanding of neural plasticity is incomplete, or we're witnessing something that defies current medical knowledge. A miracle, Marcus said quietly. Some would call it that, Dr. Chin acknowledged. Others would argue that perhaps the initial diagnosis was incomplete, that there was more viable nerve tissue than the scan suggested. But, Mr. Wellington, I looked at those scans myself. Multiple times. I even had colleagues review them. We all agreed there was no medical path forward. After Dr. Chin left, promising to follow up with recommendations for developmental support, Marcus and Sophia stood in the study, the weight of the impossible settling over them. Your children were blessed, Sophia said finally. Someone was watching over them. Someone was, Marcus agreed, looking at her directly. You were. Sophia shook her head. I didn't heal them, Marcus. I just loved them. Maybe that's the same thing, Marcus said. Maybe love is the medicine we forget to prescribe. They were interrupted by Mrs. Henderson's appearance in the doorway, her face creased with worry. Mr. Wellington, there's a situation with Emma. She's asking for her mother. Marcus's heart clenched. The twins were too young when Sarah died to remember her, and though he'd shown them pictures and videos in recent weeks, they had no visceral memory of the woman who'd given her life for theirs. What do you mean? Sophia asked. She's in the nursery, looking at the photographs, Mrs. Henderson explained. And she keeps pointing at Mrs. Wellington's picture and saying Mama. But then she looks around, searching, and she's getting distressed because she can't find her. Marcus and Sophia rushed to the nursery to find Emma standing in front of the gallery wall of family photos, tears streaming down her face. Ethan sat nearby, looking confused and upset by his sister's distress. Mama, Emma cried, pointing at a large portrait of Sarah that had been taken during her pregnancy. Where Mama? Want Mama? Marcus knelt beside his daughter, his own eyes burning with tears. Emma, sweetheart. Let me, Sophia said softly, kneeling beside him. She gathered Emma into her arms, and the little girl buried her face in Sophia's shoulder, sobbing. I know, mi amor, Sophia murmured, rocking Emma gently. I know you want her mama. And she wanted you too. So much. Where, Mama? Emma asked again, her voice muffled against Sophia's shirt. Sophia looked at Marcus, asking permission with her eyes, and he nodded. He trusted her completely. Your mama is in heaven, Sophia explained gently. That means she's not here where we can see her, but she's watching over you. Always. She sees how big you're getting, how smart you are, how beautiful. And she's so proud of you, Emma. So proud. But want Mama here? Emma insisted, and the raw longing in her voice broke Marcus's heart into pieces. I know, Sophia said again. And it's okay to be sad about that. It's okay to miss her, even though you don't remember her. Because she was your mama, and she loved you more than anything in the whole world. Ethan had crawled over to join them, and now all four of them sat on the nursery floor, Marcus, Sophia, and two children trying to understand a loss too big for their small hearts to hold. Sophie stay? Emma asked, pulling back to look at Sophia with those blue eyes that were so heartbreakingly like Sarah's. Sophie be here? Sophia's face crumpled, and Marcus saw her struggling to hold herself together. I'm here right now, sweet girl. I'm right here. But you go. Emma pressed, with the intuitive intelligence of a child who'd already learned that people you loved could disappear. Like Mama go? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Because Sophia would leave eventually, whether in months or years, she would build a new life, find new purpose, move beyond this house where grief had temporarily anchored her. Emma, Marcus said, drawing his daughter's attention. Sometimes people we love have to go away. Sometimes. He took a shaky breath. Sometimes they leave before we're ready. But that doesn't mean they didn't love us. Your mama loved you so much that she made sure you were safe, even though it meant she couldn't stay. And Sophia loves you too, he continued, meeting Sophia's eyes over his daughter's head. Right now, she's here. And that's what matters. Not worrying about tomorrow or next week or next year. Just being grateful for today. It was a lesson Marcus was still learning himself. The ability to be present, to accept love and connection even when you knew it might not last forever. Sarah had understood that. She'd loved him completely even though she must have known, in those final hours, that she was dying. Love, Marcus realized, wasn't about permanence. It was about showing up fully in whatever time you had. Sophie love us? Ethan asked, joining the conversation. Sophia pulled both children close, tears flowing freely now. I love you both so much. More than I can say. Then stay, Emma said simply, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. Stay with Papa and Emma and Ethan. Be family. Sophia looked at Marcus, and in her eyes he saw hope and fear warring in equal measure. Be family. The words his daughter had spoken so innocently contained a weight of possibility neither of them had dared to speak aloud. Emma, Sophia said carefully, families are complicated. Your papa and I were not, we haven't. Sophia's right, Marcus interjected, trying to help even as his own heart raced. We're not married like your mama and I were. We're friends. Friends who care about each other and want the best for you. But can be family anyway, Emma insisted with the stubborn logic of a toddler. Love makes family. You said that, Papa. When you read story. Marcus remembered the book, a picture book about different kinds of families, about how love created bonds stronger than blood. He'd read it a few days ago, thinking it might help the twins understand their own family structure. He hadn't expected his daughter to weaponize it against him. She's not wrong, Sophia said quietly, and when Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, he saw his own fears and hopes reflected back. Maybe we've been so focused on what we lost that we haven't seen what we could build. Not as a replacement for what we had, but as something new. Something different. Sophia, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. Are you saying? I'm saying I don't know what this is, Sophia interrupted. I'm saying that 3 months ago, I walked into this house broken and empty, and you and your children filled me back up with purpose and joy and love. I'm saying that when I think about leaving, about walking away from all of you, it feels like dying all over again. She took a shaky breath. But I'm also saying I'm scared. Because what if this is just grief talking? What if we're confusing gratitude and dependency for something deeper? What if we wake up one day and realize we made a mistake? What if we don't? Marcus countered. What if this is real, messy and complicated and born from tragedy, but real nonetheless? They stared at each other across the children in their arms, both of them standing at a crossroads. Behind them lay grief and loss and the sharp edges of broken hearts. Ahead lay uncertainty and risk and the terrifying possibility of opening themselves to love again. I'm not asking you to marry me, Marcus said, choosing his words carefully. I'm not asking you to replace Sarah or to be something you're not. But Sophia, I am asking you to stay. Not as an employee, not as a nanny, but as family. Whatever that means to you, whatever shape that takes.
Stay.
As family, Sophia repeated, testing the words. Then, to the twins. What do you think, mi amores? Should Sophie stay and be family? Yes, both children shouted, clapping their hands with the enthusiasm only toddlers could muster. Sophia laughed through her tears, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Okay," she said, looking at Marcus with a mixture of terror and hope. "Okay, I'll stay. Not forever, because neither of us can promise forever. But for now. For today. For as long as it makes sense." "For as long as it makes sense," Marcus echoed, and reached out to take her hand. As they sat together on the nursery floor, a widower, a widow, and two children who'd brought them together through a miracle neither of them could fully understand, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years.
Peace.
Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope. The quiet certainty that while their scars would never fully heal, they didn't have to define the rest of their story. They could build something new, something beautiful, something that honored both the past and the future. Together, they could be family. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his backyard watching Emma and Ethan chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. It was late September, and the evening air carried the first hint of autumn coolness. The twins had turned 3 the previous month, and the celebration had been small but joyful, just family, as they now defined it. Mrs. Henderson had retired officially, though she visited often. Rosa had become a fixture at Sunday dinners, her initial disapproval softening as she watched her daughter rebuild her life with purpose and genuine happiness. And Sophia? Sophia was everywhere. In the kitchen making the twins' favorite banana pancakes, her hair pulled back in that same messy bun. In the living room teaching them Spanish songs, her voice clear and sweet. In the nursery at night, reading bedtime stories with a flashlight under blankets, creating magic from mundane moments. And increasingly, she was beside Marcus, not as an employee or even just a co-parent but as a partner. They'd moved slowly, cautiously, both of them aware that their relationship had been forged in crisis and needed to be tested in calmer waters. But it had held. Through tantrums and teething. Through bad days when grief ambushed them both. Through awkward conversations about what they were to each other and where they were going. They still hadn't labeled it. Romance seemed too simple a word for something built on shared trauma, mutual respect, and the gradual intertwining of broken pieces into something surprisingly whole.
Papa. Sophie.
"Look," Emma called out, cupping something in her hands. "Got one." Marcus walked over with Sophia, both of them peering at the firefly blinking in Emma's careful grip. Her eyes, those miracle eyes that had learned to see, were wide with wonder. "Gentle," Sophia reminded her. "Remember, we let them go after we look." Emma opened her hands, and the firefly floated upward, its light blinking like a tiny star. Ethan laughed and tried to catch another one, his movements still slightly uncoordinated, but filled with determination. "They're happy," Sophia said softly, watching the twins play. "Really happy. Not just surviving, but thriving." "Thanks to you," Marcus said, and when Sophia started to protest, he shook his head. "I'm serious. You didn't just teach them to navigate blindness that became sight. You taught them joy. You taught them that loss doesn't have to mean the end of happiness." "We taught each other," Sophia corrected. "All of us. This family." She paused, seeming to test the word they'd all accepted but rarely spoke aloud. "This family we've built, it's not what any of us expected. But it's real. It's good." "It is," Marcus agreed. "Though I still worry sometimes that we're being unfair to you. That you deserve." "Don't," Sophia interrupted. "Don't decide what I deserve. I'm here because I choose to be. Because this family, these children, you're not a consolation prize for the life I lost. You're not second best. You're what came next. And what came next turned out to be pretty wonderful." Marcus pulled her close, and she leaned into him, both of them watching the twins play. They'd learned to be comfortable with silence, with the unspoken understanding that some things didn't need words. "I've been thinking," Marcus said after a while, "about the future. About making this official." Sophia stiffened slightly. "Marcus." "Not marriage," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever, if that's not what you want. But adoption. I want to adopt Emma and Ethan as yours legally. I want their birth certificates to show both our names. Because, Sophia, you are their mother in every way that matters. Sophia pulled back to look at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. What about Sarah? I would never want to replace her, to make them forget. You're not replacing her, Marcus said firmly. You're honoring her. She gave them life, but you taught them how to live. You gave them sight, not just in their eyes, but in their hearts. You showed them that love doesn't have to be scarce, that you can hold grief and joy in the same hands. He took Sophia's face gently in his hands. They'll know Sarah's story. We'll tell them about her constantly. We'll visit her grave and look at photos and watch videos. But they'll also know your story, Sophia. They'll know about Diego and Miguel, about loss and resilience, and the courage it takes to love again after everything's been taken from you. I want that, Sophia whispered. I want to be their mother officially. Not because I'm trying to take Sarah's place, but because they're mine. They've been mine since that first night in the bath, when Emma looked at me and really saw me. They chose me, and I chose them. Then we'll make it legal, Marcus said. We'll give them two mothers, one who watches from heaven and one who walks beside them every day. Both equally important, both equally loved. Sophia kissed him then, sweet and tentative, the way they'd learned to kiss each other, with gratitude and affection and the recognition that second chances were precious gifts not to be taken lightly. Sophie.
Papa.
Come play. Ethan shouted, breaking the moment but not ruining it. They joined the twins in their game, chasing fireflies and catching starlight, and Marcus felt something he'd thought was lost forever, contentment. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of peace alongside it. The understanding that life could be beautiful even when it wasn't what you'd planned. That night, after the twins were asleep, Marcus found himself in his study looking at the photograph of Sarah he kept on his desk. She smiled out at him from the frame, young and vibrant and full of dreams for a future she'd never see. I hope you approve, Marcus said quietly to the image. I hope you know I'm not forgetting you, or replacing you. But Sarah, I'm trying to live. I'm trying to give our children the kind of love you would have wanted them to have. And Sophia, she's not you. She'll never be you. But she's good, Sarah. She's so good. And she loves them fiercely. She loves me, I think, though we're both still learning what that means. He traced the edge of the frame. The twins can see now. It's impossible, miraculous, and they can see. They saw fireflies tonight, Sarah. They saw them and laughed and played. And I thought about how much you would have loved this moment. How you would have been right there with them, catching fireflies and telling them stories about stars. A soft knock interrupted his one-sided conversation. Sophia stood in the doorway, hesitant. Sorry, she said. I heard you talking and thought maybe. Come in, Marcus said, gesturing to the chair beside him. I was just talking to Sarah, telling her about today. Sophia sat, her eyes going to the photograph. She was beautiful. She was, Marcus agreed. And she would have liked you, I think. She always said she could spot other mothers from a mile away. Women who loved fiercely and put their children first, no matter the cost. I failed at that, Sophia said quietly. With Diego. I couldn't save him. You loved him, Marcus corrected. For his whole life, all 6 minutes of it. You loved him completely. That's not failure, Sophia. That's the most profound success there is. Sophia reached out and touched the photograph gently. Thank you, she said to Sarah's image. Thank you for giving them life. For loving Marcus enough to give him these beautiful children. And thank you. Her voice broke. Thank you for trusting me with them. I promise I'll take care of them. I promise I'll tell them about you. I promise they'll know how loved they were before they even took their first breath. Marcus took Sophia's hand, and they sat together in the quiet study, honoring the woman who'd come before and the life they were building in her wake. It wasn't the life any of them had planned. Sarah hadn't planned to die. Sophia hadn't planned to lose her husband and son. Marcus hadn't planned to be a widower raising blind twins. But somewhere in the grief and loss and impossible miracles, they'd found each other. They'd built a family from broken pieces. They'd learned that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms, it adapts, it finds new vessels and new expressions. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it finds a way to heal what seemed permanently shattered. As Marcus and Sophia left the study and headed upstairs, they paused outside the twins' room. Through the cracked door, they could see Emma and Ethan sleeping peacefully, night lights casting gentle shadows across their faces. Their eyes were closed now, but Marcus knew that when they woke in the morning, they would open. They would see the sunrise. They would see each other. They would see the two people who loved them most in the world, a father who'd learned to open his heart again, and a mother who'd chosen them when she'd lost everything else. "We did good," Sophia whispered. "We did," Marcus agreed. "We're doing good." And as they stood together in the hallway, two survivors of devastating loss who'd found unexpected grace in each other, Marcus understood the truth that had taken him 2 years to learn. Light doesn't just come from the absence of darkness. Sometimes it comes from people who've walked through darkness and chosen to carry a candle for others who are still finding their way. Sophia had been his candle. His children had been hers. And together, they'd illuminated a path forward that honored both the past and the promise of tomorrow. It wasn't the life they'd planned, but it was a life worth living, worth fighting for, worth celebrating. And in the end, that was the greatest miracle of all. 1 year later, on a crisp October morning, 4 people stood in a cemetery. Marcus held flowers for Sarah's grave. Sophia held similar flowers for Miguel and Diego's shared stone. Emma and Ethan, now 4 years old and tall for their age, held small bouquets they'd picked from the garden. They visited both graves every month, a ritual Sophia had suggested and Marcus had embraced. The twins knew both stories now. They knew about their birth mother, who'd been brave and loving. They knew about Sophia's son and husband who'd been taken too soon. "Mama Sarah," Emma said, placing her flowers carefully on the grave. "We miss you. But Mama Sophie takes good care of us. And Papa too." "We can see," Ethan added, as he always did, as if he needed Sarah to know about the miracle. "We can see everything." After their ritual words were spoken and a few moments of silence observed, the family walked to Miguel and Diego's grave nearby. Sophia knelt, touching the names carved in stone. "Hola, mi amor." "Hola, pequeño Diego," she whispered. "I'm happy. I know you'd want me to be happy. And I am. These children, they saved me. Just like I'd hoped our Diego would grow up to change my world, Emma and Ethan have changed it. Just differently than I expected." Marcus stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, and the twins leaned against her sides. They were a unit now, a family bound not by blood alone but by choice and love and shared understanding of life's fragility. As they walked back to the car, Emma slipped her hand into Sophia's and Ethan took Marcus's hand. Then, in the middle, Emma reached for her father's hand and Ethan reached for Sophia's, creating an unbroken chain. "Family," Emma declared with satisfaction. "Family," they all echoed. And in that simple word was everything: loss and love, grief and grace, endings and beginnings all woven together into something stronger than any of them could have built alone. The light they carried wasn't bright enough to banish all shadows, but it was enough to see by. Enough to find the way forward. Enough to know that even in life's darkest moments, hope could take root and bloom into something beautiful. Together, they carried that light home.